And just to give an introduction to obviously Gen AI Fest, it's something that we do at the University of Liverpool. We put it on each year. We try and cover as many different topics within generative AI as we can. Today's session is going to be a sort of very basic introduction, but we appreciate everyone comes to this with a totally different experience of generative AI. And that's why the Padlet, where we're asking the sort of questions about whether you're using it already or how you'd like to use it, that's just to get an understanding of what you know and what you'd like to know, and if we can address that in the examples from today's session. So I'm Rob, I'm at the University of Liverpool with Gary, and some colleagues have joined us here, so it's great to see you all. Gary, I'll hand over to you if that's all right, and we'll get started. We've got an hour, so we'll be prompt, and there's lots of time for questions. Please feel free to use the chat at any point. Just pop questions into that. I'll keep an eye on that. And Gary, over to you.
Okay, great. So thank you, Rob. Okay, so today we're going to do a very basic session on generative AI and try and give you an idea about what the technology is, where it's kind of come from, how you can use it, be it if you're in a job in professional services or if you're in a more academic role, and then try and show you some examples of the technology in action and some of the different tools as well that are available to you. Okay, so we'll run through first of all, what is a large language model? Rob, should I go through this or do you want to go through this one?
All yours, Gary.
Okay, so it's LLMs are the most common forms of AI that we can use as sort of beginners with the technology, really. And a large language model is a type of AI that's been trained on an enormous amount of data. Normally, they use computers to kind of scrape all the information they can from the internet and try and build a model of as much sort of human knowledge as they can. So they've been trained on enormous amounts of text, and they try and identify patterns across that text. So it's very similar to when you're typing messages on your phone and you have predictive text, you have autocomplete. It's looking to guess the next word, which is the likely response to your question, and it's quite incredible, but it will make very sort of believable answers based on the next correct word. It'll build these very coherent sequences of words. So this is how ChatGPT works. Google has one called Gemini. There's a French company called Anthropic has one called Claude, and they can produce text answers to pretty much anything you ask them to. It could be an essay, a summary, emails, lesson plans, even creative writing as well. And they will produce very confident text and sometimes it's very confident sounding mistakes. So the first thing, if you're not familiar with this technology, the first thing to remember is you've got to check everything that they produce, because although a lot of the content that they make is perfect, they do still make mistakes. Okay, so how do these things actually work? Sorry, just go back. So they're trained on enormous amounts of data, and they work on this kind of next word prediction system. So given the prompt, they will try and guess the next word in the sequence again and again until it produces sentences, paragraphs, even essays. Most of the time, it might seem counterintuitive, but most of the time they don't search the internet to do this. They just use all of the training data to produce the answers. Over the last couple of years, some of them have added in web search to the products, but generally they're just using their training data to produce their answers. Okay. It's almost like it's a hyper sort of intelligent child who's read through an entire library, and that they can imitate pretty much anything you ask them to do. They can imitate tone, they can imitate roles, they can imitate styles, they can be usefully creative, but you will find they still make certain errors. So a lot of the skill with these things is the instructions that you give them and how much information, how much detail, how much context you give them when you're asking them to do things. Okay, so what kind of things, how can they be useful to us as staff at university? What can they produce? So what they're really good at producing is drafts, drafts for emails, initial drafts for things like policies. If you're putting in a transcript, they can make a draft of some decent meeting minutes, and they're good at making templates as well. If you're an academic member of staff, they can produce good ideas for lesson plans, maybe your outlines for your presentation slides. If you're looking to start work on something like a rubric, it can be a really great way to save yourself some time getting started. And a lot of the time, this is the best use of these things, is a kind of force multiplier. They get you started, they save you some time, and then you do the more serious editing and make the more serious decisions later in the process. Very good at making summaries. 2 years ago, when these things came out, first of all, they were less good at reading long documents. Okay, but over the past couple of years, the amount of context that they can hold in their memory has got longer and longer and longer, and now they can confidently summarize research papers, reports, transcripts, even books to a certain extent. They're very good at rewriting and differentiating things. You might give them something you've written quickly and ask it to differentiate it for different types of purposes or different profiles of people, intended readers. And they can create things for students, which kind of gives us the ability to personalize things a bit more than we've had before. Very good for brainstorming. If you're starting a project and you need to generate ideas, and you give it a good amount of your context, and the task that you're trying to achieve, they will produce as many ideas as you ask them to. So very good ideas for curriculums, potentially the types of events that we might look to host, even research questions. They're getting better and better at explaining data as well. So again, 2 years ago, if you uploaded a spreadsheet into these things, you would get some pretty strange results at times if you ask it to interpret it. But as they've progressed, if you upload documents into these things, they're now going to give you much more confident analysis of the data included. Extremely good at coding. All of the main models now have kind of coding parts of them that you can use, and they can write computer programs, they can code websites for you, and they can write code to perform tasks for you. So we found at the start in 2022 when ChatGPT was released, it couldn't really do simple maths. If you gave it a 3-digit multiplication to perform, it would get it wrong quite reliably. But over time, they realized it's so good at coding, it can write code to perform these tasks and manage to get these things correct for you. And now they can also produce multimedia content. I think Rob will talk a little more about that, but they can produce images and video, even edit existing images. And they can also look at images as well. So you can give it an image of something, you can ask it to explain it to you, generate captions, alt text, anything like that. So yeah, they're getting better and better at many, many tasks. Okay. So how could these tools potentially be useful for us? If we're an academic member of staff, we find that we can make first drafts of many things, including lesson plans or slides that we can then go forward and adapt and develop. They can generate things like assessment items, formative assessment items, and model answers. If you don't want to use student examples or you want to generate something quite specific for students to look at, as opposed to writing it yourself from the ground up, you can have it generate these answers and then adapt them as you need, saving time. They can produce very different versions of feedback. If you want to import your feedback to one of these things, it can then rewrite it, suggest ways to make it more detailed, even make it more concise for you, and change the tone where appropriate, maybe make it more encouraging, for example. You can create checklists for things like inclusive teaching or accessibility. And you can actually do things like summarize whole papers to decide whether or not these things should be read in full. Now, this always needs you to check, and in fact, every single one of these things needs you to check it. And one of the things that we're saying to students, which is equally true to staff, is that you have to have the sufficient level of expertise to check the output of these tools. If you can't confidently verify the quality of the output, you probably shouldn't be using them for those kind of purposes. Okay, if we are in professional services, it has a equally sort of broad range of uses. So it can draft very clear, polite communication. We're going to look later on at how it can help us with things like emails. It can very quickly turn meeting transcripts into actionable lists and assign like people to that, even prioritize tasks based on the content of a transcript of a meeting, which can be very useful. It can produce other types of content, FAQs, summaries of policies, and even things connected to HR or administration, onboarding checklists. And it really is only limited by your imagination and your ability to give it decent instructions, really. Also, can make accessible versions of copy, alt text, simplified guides, all the types of things that we may find sort of mechanical in nature, but can save us time if we get a bit of help from the large language model. Okay, so we also have ethical considerations. I think Rob's going to run through these.
Yeah, thanks, Gary. And this really is a sort of minefield, as you've probably heard in the media, in any sort of academic research into how these tools were developed. I think there was an article on Monday, Gary, I don't know if you're aware of this, about Anthropic, one of the leading AI companies. I'll put it in the chat, being fined 1.5 billion for theft of copyrighted works to build the models. So in building the models of AI, what they've done is run through extensive data sources from the internet that they've scraped from databases, from copywritten materials. They've put it into the machine. They've asked it to then consider those as the data source without permission from the author, content and producers, the copyright owners. And that forms a part of the whole sort of range of different ethical considerations that people have and should have when they come to use these technologies. And we're finding as educators that students are quite, proactive in actually bringing these to the forefront, which I think is very important, because these tools are questionable, the way that they've been designed through human labor, for example, to have moderation, in a similar vein to social networks where people are looking at things that they don't want the mass to see and flagging them. People have had to do that with this. And really, Gary, we've seen, questions around sustainability, the energy requirements of them. I think it's up to the individual as well as the sort of companies themselves, but the individuals especially, to look into and research what they're comfortable with in terms of their use of these models. So don't just sort of go out there and think this is great to use, it's fine. It's a question, it's a discussion, it's a gray area. The idea around truth, the things that they output being wrong and then being used to then publish further. So it covers a whole range of issues that are covered in this graphic, and we'll share a higher quality version of this with the source of that, just so you can really get your understanding around it. The environmental issues, a key consideration. Again, there's a bit of a division in how much energy is actually used to produce content from these models, but more research needs to be done into that so there's a clearer picture. I do think there's a pathway for more ethical companies within AI to actually say we are trying to do this the right way, rather than the sort of land grab that seems to be going on between the key players. For example, Google, OpenAI, Meta. They're all at the minute, it seems to be looking for market share, and we're not certain of which one, is the most ethical in terms of if there is a more ethical platform to use. But that's something that we as an institution will try and find out and then promote that one perhaps more so. So the Anthropic story, I think, is really interesting, where they have agreed to actually pay this huge fee, the largest class action, I think, against the copywritten case. So, that's the sign of things to come. I think it's, we'll pay our way out of this. So you may have an issue with using them in the first place, which we take on board with students. We listen to that view as well. And we're just flagging that in this session as it is the basic session. And more will come of that across the week in dedicated sessions. So yeah, keep an eye out for that in each session that you attend and have a little read of that. So yeah, Gary, I think we can skip on from that slide. And just to touch on the idea that actually they're becoming more multimodal. So there's a session on, let me just see, I think it's Wednesday this week, multimodality. And what we mean by that is how initially these tools would be text input, text output. So you would give it a prompt, give me a recipe list, and it would output you a recipe list, perhaps in bullet points, but it would give you the ingredients in text. That then became rich text that may have led to links and websites, which then itself became images, video, audio. And what we're seeing here is a progression towards the idea that actually now, using just a prompt with AI, we can design quite complex scenarios, simulations, immersive experiences. In medicine, that might be asking it to give you a patient that can respond to your input and give you outputs based on the context. So it really is a sort of growing technology. And that's the idea that over time, the complexity of the output is increasing, whereas the complexity of the input isn't. So the prompts don't have to get much more technical, but actually from that, we're developing video, interactive media, a lot more rich content than what we were previously, even up to sort of 4 years ago. So keep an eye on that. That's something we'll demonstrate soon. And just to give you an example of that on the next slide, an initial prompt for give me a PowerPoint slide with logos of different Gen AI companies. If I'd put that in sort of 2 years ago into ChatGPT 3.5, which is an earlier model, and the model of the GPT is denoted by the number, denoted, sorry. So GPT-5 is the latest sort of free-to-air model. You get a limited use of that, and with a paid version, you get more, but it is free through OpenAI. And if I'd put in that prompt now, you can try it at home. What you'll get back using just GPT-5 is that sort of placeholder PowerPoint slide that can be downloaded. It works. It's a PowerPoint slide, but it doesn't actually have anything on it. It's just got the names. So it knows the names and the titles and a placeholder. If you use agent mode, which perhaps we might explore today, but we'll certainly explore in the advanced session on Friday, what that will then do is go out, find me the logos, bring them back, put them on the PowerPoint slide, and structure it nicely. So already we've got that difference between a text-based output and a multimedia-based output with links and sources. So we'll give you an example of that as we go, but that's just the idea that things are getting a bit more multimedia heavy from the outputs, and which is good to see because actually it's saving us a lot of time in certain content design and production processes. So Gary, I think on the next slide, we asked the question, and this is just open. If people want to take part in this, that's fine. We'll use it in the background. I'll put a link in the chat. What we're asking here really is if you are using AI, because again, this session, it's quite hard to consider what a basic session covers because a lot of people come to this with a lot of different experience. So what we were hoping to see from that is there a range of use cases and what people would actually like to do it? So if that works for you, please open up that Padlet and pop your thoughts on there. And as that's populated, if it is, what we're going to do, Gary's going to sort of take us through the different platforms, some prompts, some different ideas. Feel free to put stuff in the chat as we go. We'll try and cover as much as we can. We'll pick up any questions. And really, we've got sort of 40 minutes, 45 minutes to do that, Gary. So I don't think anyone's using the Padlet at the minute. That's absolutely fine. We'll leave that link in the chat, but we'll go to you now for some sort of hands-on stuff. And if people do want to ask questions, just throw it up in the chat and I'll put it to Gary as soon as I see it.
Okay, I'll just reshare my screen quickly. Okay. Okay. So what we'll find with, can you see that? Sorry, Rob, should that be, can you see ChatGPT?
Yeah, that's perfect.
Perfect. Okay. What we find with the interfaces for these products is that they're amazingly sort of simple at first glance, and they actually all look very, very similar still at this point. So we can see in the center of the screen, we have this box which just invites us to ask anything at all. And we can write any instruction in natural language. We don't need to be particularly technical, and it will try and perform that task for us. Okay, so if I just move through a couple of products, you'll see that they all look very similar. This is ChatGPT, which is probably the most well-known of any of the models. Google Gemini, very, very similar. Ask Gemini, similar text box in the center of the screen. The most popular Chinese model is DeepSeek, and we can see DeepSeek looks very, very similar as well. And Anthropic from Claude, which I won't show now, but looks almost identical to all of these. Okay. What we do see is we have a microphone on the right-hand side of most of these, and that allows us to speak a prompt if we prefer. I've actually been doing this a lot recently, and I find it a lot quicker and maybe more natural. So you can speak your prompt, and it will sort of transcribe it. Especially useful if you're going to give it a long and detailed prompt. And then some of them have this voice mode as well, and that's where you get rid of the writing altogether and you just speak to the thing. It generates a voice which is unnervingly natural, and you can have a conversation with it almost in real time. You know, small delay for it to produce its responses, but it's almost like speaking to a person. Okay. In the plus menu, which we have in all of them, we can see we have it in Gemini as well. DeepSeek has something similar. We have these options down here. We have a few other options, so we can now upload files if we want the model to have a look at something that we're working on or something that we're interested in. We can upload a document or a photo. You can also just paste a photo directly into the chat box. And then we also have these other things, agent mode, which we'll speak about on Friday, which is where it will go off and try and perform tasks for us. Deep research is very interesting. I'll try and show that later today. This is where you give it something to research and it will go off, read what it can on the internet, and come back and compile you a report based on your prompt, give you all the links as well. It will create images for us, so we can give it an instruction in text, and it will build us an image using what's called a diffusion model, which is getting a lot better. A couple of years ago when this first started was lots of images of people with 6 or 7 fingers on each hand, and all the text was a little bit crazy, but now they're getting a lot better. And I would say actually that's true across the board. Like if you're using these things every week, you don't really notice the changes too much because they're improved incrementally. But if you give it a couple of months between uses, you do see quite large jumps. So if anyone used ChatGPT when it was first released in November 2022 and decided it wasn't particularly useful, it's certainly worth revisiting and sort of looking at the modern versions because every year they come on quite a lot. Another interesting mode that most of these have now, Gemini has the same thing, is like a study mode, a learning mode. And this is where it will try and reveal the information to you more gradually and check your understanding going through it. So for students, if they want comprehension questions built into these interactions, you can use the study mode and it will try and work through it with you a little more gradually instead of just giving you all the information at once based on your prompt. Okay, so we'll have a look at a couple of things. Rob, where would you like to start with this?
I think if we just go through, so I'm just keeping an eye on the chat as well. We'll touch on the first question now, actually, because there's a question about, is there a preferred AI tool the university would like us to use? So this is specific to the University of Liverpool. So could we look at Edge, Gary, and just give an idea how University of Liverpool colleagues can access that and perhaps other institutions? But at Liverpool, it's not it's not the recommended tool, but it is the safest tool considering our contract with Microsoft. So yeah, just a quick demo of Edge and what we can do within that, please.
Okay, so inside of the Edge browser, Microsoft has their own AI model, which they've given an enormous amount of money to OpenAI to be able to use. So they call it Copilot, and you can access it in a variety of ways. Let me just try and move this away. So in Windows, I've actually removed the button on mine, but there's normally a button at the taskbar that you can open it at any time. And you can actually see in Microsoft Edge on my browser here, in the top right, there's this little colorful symbol, and it opens up a sidebar here with the access to the chatbot. Okay, so this is actually built on the same model that ChatGPT is built on, so it's extremely competent, and you can do a lot of the same things. You can add your content to it, you can upload images, you can attach files from the cloud, you can speak into it, and it will help you in a very similar way to all of the others. It's maybe a little less fully featured than the paid versions of ChatGPT, but it will perform most of the tasks in a very similar way. So it gives you a few prompts to start with. If you're reading a page, if you're reading, say, a news article or something like that, you can ask it to summarize the main points on the page. It's very interesting. You can ask, help me get started with Copilot. So, or you can type your own prompt. So I'm just going to use one of these preset prompts with help me get started with Copilot. It's just going to give me a few little ideas. So I could say, explain the basics of large language models in bullet points, something like that. And it will just go away, do some thinking, and it's actually responded to my prompt here. So it's done what I asked. It's given the format in a bulleted form. It's given me some ways to read. And then it's given me some follow-up questions, which is a very sort of useful function of a lot of these models. It will let you deepen your understanding, or it will try and assist you with your task by prompting you how to continue. One of the things that's really important to understand with these things is it's not a one and done interaction. That these are lengthy conversations, potentially lengthy interactions. And if you don't get what you want, it's worth talking to it and explaining why its output wasn't what you wanted and what you do actually want. Because the prompting is a skill, and at the start of it, you might find you're getting results that are a little too generic or a little uh, disconnected to what it is you're actually looking for. And rather than abandoning the interaction, it's always better to go back and give it more detail, more context, give it a role, tell it what you want it to be, and it will get a lot closer to what you're actually after. So yeah, it is a skill, but it's not a particularly difficult thing to learn. You don't need anything technical. You don't need to really understand how the model creates stuff. You don't need any computer experience really, because you're always talking to it in natural language. Okay. Should we run through a few examples, Rob?
Yeah,
Go
let's
through a
go
few
through a
bits.
few examples. And we've got a good question as well, Gary, that applies to all of these examples. So the first one is, what sort of information should I put into an AI tool and what should I not?
Okay, well, the privacy things are very, very important. You can actually use the settings in your models. So if I just drag this out of the way, if I go to data controls in the settings for ChatGPT, it's very much the same for Gemini, the same for Claude, the same for DeepSeek. Um, you can you see this parameter here, improve the model for everybody. Okay, so if we read the text under it, allow your content to be used to train our models, which makes it better for everyone who uses it. Okay. Um, if I turn that off, then it won't save any of the um, the conversations that I have with it. So any of the data that I input into it, I think it stays for 30 days and then it's fully deleted. It stays for 30 days just so you can continue those conversations in the short term, but then after that, it's removed completely. Um, Obviously, this improves your privacy, but it means over time you can't go back and continue dialogues you've had on a particular topic because all your conversations are saved. So if you feel this is something you're going to be going back to over a year, for example, you wouldn't be able to turn that off because you would lose your conversations. But on the other hand, it does mean that none of the things you're inputting would be used as data by the company to train the models in the future. Do you want to add anything to that, Rob?
No, just that it's very similar across the platforms, and that, as you said, it if you always look for data privacy controls when you first start using a platform like ChatGPT, Gemini, see if you can seek out how easy it is to turn those off, because that will give you some idea of actually the nature of the company behind it. And I believe Google have just updated their terms to say that, is that right, Gary, that they will use quite a lot of your content actually now, outside of the notebook platform, which we'll cover.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Um, okay, we'll have a look at how we can work with it. There's an interesting way to start off is with an image. So this is just an image that I Googled. I Googled the Victoria Building from the university, and I just pasted it into Gemini. So this is how we can sort of use image editing really inside of an LLM just with natural language. So my prompt was very simple. I said, I want to use this image as the centerpiece of my university department's Christmas card. Imbue it with the magic of Christmas in a wintry scene. The structures and the features of the building must remain consistent. The scene will be in the nighttime, no text. Okay, so that was the original image. That is an actual photograph that is not generated by the AI. And then this is what it came up with. So it actually acted on my prompt. It's put the image at night. It's added a few Christmas trees in there. We have a bit of snow on the ground. The tree is a real tree that was in the image, and it's added sort of these very festive lights around the building. Now, obviously, if I was going to try and create something like this myself in Photoshop, it would take me a significant amount of time. But this can be generated in a couple of seconds using the large language model. So then after that, just to show that this is a sort of continuing dialogue you can have with it, I made another prompt for it. I said, okay, now using the same original image, make a futuristic scene, flying cars, robots, expertly rendered 3D text over the top in the center saying Gen AI Fest. Okay. And it's done a pretty good job. It's a little cold, but we could ask it to change that maybe. But it's managed to render the text and add it onto the image. We still have the building largely unaltered, and it's done some impressive work with perspective here and a sort of isometric aspect. It's added in a couple of sort of signatures of the future. Um, and again, it's something that if you're looking to promote an event or something like that, it's a way that you can get some relatively professional work looking done very, very quickly and with very little effort. Obviously, there are some implications here for people who work with images and who derive their salaries from that kind of work. But it is a tool that we now have available to us, and you can download these images and share them or use them however you like. Most of them do add a little watermark. It's probably quite difficult to see, but in the bottom corner, there is actually the logo of Gemini, which kind of gives you an indication that Gemini has created this image. And yeah, it can be used with that. With that. So that is how we can work with images very, very easily. Again, um, no technical sort of knowledge needed really. You just speak to it in natural language, and it will create these quite impressive adaptations or completely new images for you, um,
Mhm.
just based on that.
Gary, question from Dan. Does it ask you if you own the image you're working with? Which is a very good question.
It doesn't. No, no. It will. No, it won't ask you for anything of the sort, really. Even if you paste in logos of companies and things like that, and you ask for them to be adapted, something that's quite obviously owned by someone else, it won't ask you. It might occasionally, if it feels you might be um, using a likeness of a person, it might refuse to perform the task. But aside from that, even big prize-winning, world-famous photographs, it will still adapt them as you like.
Yeah, we
Um,
found actually with people it is a bit more cautious, where perhaps we've tried to generate as well some medical imagery done. I don't know if you know about that project, and we've come up against walls in that it will assume that the imagery we're producing is unsuitable, even if perhaps it is for medical terms, medical purposes. So there are guardrails there. I don't think they're very secure. I don't think, in the world of deep fakes and everything, it's definitely an ethical consideration for what you can get these images to do. And you've probably seen sort of big meme generated images online where people have used AI to alter real people. So definitely an area of concern in some areas, but just to show you the actual technology behind it, Gary.
yeah, absolutely. Okay, we'll have a look very quickly with how we can use ChatGPT for something. One thing that these products do normally have is these little drop-down menus in the top of the screen in the left side. And what that will do is show you the different models that you have available to you. So if you're working on a free account, you will normally have the basic models free to you all the time. The more intensive models that do a little more thinking and reasoning, you normally have a limited amount in a time frame. So maybe you could use them 10 times in a month or whatever. So these models are better for different purposes. So we have in ChatGPT, we have auto where it decides the model. So if you don't want to get involved with this at the start, you can leave it to the LLM to decide which model it should use. You have this instant model, which, as you can imagine, is faster, but maybe of slightly lower quality, the output. Thinking Mini is a quick reasoning model. If you're going to give it a complex task where it might have to review its own output and improve it in a short amount of time, you could use that. And the thinking model itself thinks a lot longer. It can be a couple of minutes maybe before you get your response, but you will generally get the highest quality of any of these, especially if you're asking it to perform something where a little bit of reasoning is maybe needed. The Pro model is unavailable to me because I'm not paying £180 a month for ChatGPT. But if you have access to the Pro model, you will get longer, more detailed, and better reviewed answers from it. There's
Yeah.
also older models. O3 is, if that's available. I'm not sure if it's available on the free one, but absolutely fantastic model O3 and GPT-4o. has a little more personality in the writing maybe than GPT-5. I think there's very little in it between 4 and 5, if I'm being honest. But yeah, it's worth experimenting with the different models and finding out which ones you respond to and which ones give you the kind of output that you're looking for.
Yeah, to go just to flag that sort of model division, I think that brings it to the front the idea of digital division, doesn't it? In that some people will have access to the better models through a paid plan, and some staff or specifically students will not. So it's something as an institution we're trying to consider. You know, we want people to have a fair access, fair equity in education. So, you know, if we can provide an institutional license, at least we could guarantee that there is a bit of a level playing field there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, some of the models are almost completely free. I think DeepSeek is almost
Mm.
completely free. When we I teach in the English Language Center, we have a lot of students from China on our pre-sessional course during the summer, and we gave them a poll on the tools they were using, and it was almost exclusively DeepSeek actually, which was quite interesting. I think it was 85% DeepSeek. So we might assume all our students are using ChatGPT, but um, it certainly varies across demographics for sure. Okay, have a look at a basic prompt here. We're going to think about how we might use it to help us with an email. Okay, so I've written an email, but the email isn't particularly good. So what I want to do is uh, get a bit of help from the language model to improve my email. Okay, so before I paste the email in, I've just written this prompt, um, which can hopefully improve our email for us. So the first thing I've done is given it a job. So I've told it that it is a professional communications officer. Okay. And I've given it a context of a British university. So it will use, it won't use American English, it will use British English, and it should use language appropriate for this type of role. Then I've given it the task, so rewrite the email to be concise, clear, and empathetic. I've given it a limitation of 100 words, and I've asked it to keep the main points in the email. So this is very important that it doesn't omit this information. I've also given it the reason for the email. There's a technical issue with a submission portal, and who the students would contact. So all of the information really is included in the prompt. I've also asked it to include a one-line reassurance. Okay, so this prompt um, includes everything that the model needs to know. It includes the instruction, it includes the tone, really, it includes the role, and everything it needs. And over time, as you use these things, you'll find yourself um, including more and more of this type of information to get the sort of results that you need. Okay, so all I'm going to do now is paste in the text of the email that I wrote that I wasn't particularly happy with. So I've added in the text there. There it is. Um, under the prompt. So I have the prompt and then I have my email. So all I have to do then is hit the send button and we can see what it comes up with. Okay, so I can see it's GPT-5. It's thinking longer for a better answer. So it's decided that my task should use a reasoning model. If it wasn't using a reasoning model, it'll be more or less instant. Okay, and it's taken 13 seconds there, and we can see that it's rewritten the email. It is. I'm just going to review it very quickly, but yeah, it has included all of the correct information. It has included the reassurance I can see here that we asked for. It has included all of the details, and now it's more clear, more concise, and maybe a little bit more professional. Okay, so as opposed to me rewriting the email myself and maybe taking a little time, most of my time here is spent reviewing the output and just confirming that it does everything I have to. And over the course of a year or whatever, these kind of pieces of assistance can certainly add up. I think a couple of companies who have implemented AI across the company, and there was a large study of high schools in America and teachers. It was decided that teachers were saving around 5 to 6 weeks over the course of a year if they were using AI effectively for administrative tasks. So yeah, it could be very useful over time. Anything to add there, Rob?
No, I think that covers it. Just that is a really good use case for it in terms of actually, generating content that is very formal, very administrative. You can save time doing that en masse. You can export. I don't know if you want to show how to export, even just to a Word document as an example, but that's quite a useful feature as well.
Yeah, let me move this about. So there's a couple of ways we can do it, really. At the top of the response, or at the bottom of the response, sorry, we have copy. So you can just copy all of the text. You can also ask it. So I could say, give me that as a, and then you can ask it for any sort of format that you like. You could ask it for a plain text file. You could ask it for a PDF. You could ask it for, in this case, I'm going to ask it for a Word document. So give me that as a professionally formatted docx. And what it will do, and this is a good opportunity to see how it does this actually, is it said analyzing there. And if I'd have opened that up with the little drop down, I'd have seen it writing code in Python to create the document. So you'd have seen the actual computer code that it used to create the document. And there it is. So we can see this is the code that would be necessary to include this text in a Word document.
And
Okay,
Gary,
with
that
all of
links to a question. One of the questions earlier was, do you think it's still worth learning to code with obviously this doing the sort of no code input outputs?
I mean, there's been a huge rise in the last year or so of people doing something they seem to be terming vibe coding now, where they they do a lot of it via the LLM, and then the debugging and the improvement themselves. I think it's still, obviously it's still worth learning to code, and I think there's going to be a job that maybe gets even more important, but the way the job happens is likely going to be a little different, and they're going to be working alongside um, the large language models rather than independently. I think most programmers are using this very heavily in their jobs at the moment. Yeah,
Yeah.
very
And just to
interesting.
touch on that example you've done there. So let's say, without going into the details of how you would use student data, because obviously that's something we would consider not being safe to use unless it was within a specific environment. But if you had lots of information that you need to produce different documents from. So in this example, we had one email for one delayed deadline. But if we had lots of delayed deadlines, lots of room changes, for example, anything like that, you would very quickly be able to upload that as a spreadsheet in a data secure environment and produce different drafts, almost like a mail merge, but for different reasons very quickly. And that's one of the areas I think that it's the time saving that we've talked about, isn't it? It's that administration side of things.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I could show something similar to that now. Actually, let me see if I can. So I actually got the AI to make a little spreadsheet of student results. So in the spreadsheet, it has a first and a second marker. There are, I think, three intended learning outcomes for each one of the 10 fake students that I asked it to create. So we have just having a spreadsheet like that um, lets us perform some data analysis extremely quickly, extremely quickly. So I've written a prompt for this. So I've said to it, first of all, what I've done. I've uploaded a spreadsheet with this name, and I've told it what it contains. So that it contains the 10 students, first, second marker, the scores, and each student has two markers from a pool of four. Okay. What I've asked it to do is analyze if there are any discrepancies in the marking patterns, and also to calculate the average and the median score each marker gave across all of the ILOs, and what I wanted to show in the data analysis as well. So I won't go through the whole prompt, but I asked it for a couple of bar charts and that as well, and a box plot. So, and also an interpretation of, are any markers, you know, largely out of line with the others and might need retraining. Okay, so it will have a look at the spreadsheet now. We can see it's read it and we've seen it here, and it will try and produce what I've asked it to produce. This thing is quite a complex task I've given it, so it's going to think a little bit longer. It will use the reasoning model, the data analysis model, um, and now it will write some code to perform the analysis that I've asked it to.
And while it's doing that, Gary, we've got a question from Andrew about the difference between GPT-5 and GPT-4 Is it any less sycophantic, sort of flattering
I,
in
th
its
I think
substance, or?
I think it's more sycophantic and more flattering, to be honest. What you can do, which I will show once these results are performed, is you can actually give it instructions about how you want it to talk to you across all chats. You don't have to write it in every prompt that you ever make, but you can give it instructions that are global about how you want it to act and how you want it to respond across all chats. In fact, I think I can do this while it's working. So if I go to customize ChatGPT in my settings, just down to your profile, customize ChatGPT, you can say what you want it to call you. You can give it information about your job, and then we have this option: what personality should it have? You can ask it to be a cynic, a robot, a listener, or a nerd. Never actually experimented with these. You can say what traits it should have. Okay. And then anything else it should know about you. You can give it interest, personal stuff or stuff connected to the job. And in the advanced section, you can say the kind of things it should use regularly. So we have web search, coding, Canvas, which we'll look at shortly, and advanced voice options. So this is very useful. You can, if what traits should it have? If it starts to annoy you being so sycophantic, you can um, tell it to kind of just give you only the information, not dress it up, not give you huge appendices to everything. You can make it a little bit more plain speaking, basically.
Yeah, and that's the idea of personalization, isn't it? Where the technology really is becoming it's sort of, some people are scared by this because they think, well, I don't want it to know my job or my name or anything like that. But other people perhaps might want that ease of being able to just go back to it and rely on it almost as an assistant, that you get what you want from it each time. And there is a division in how people want to use this technology. In terms of learning, we're seeing students that actually want that personalization. So it knows their course, it knows their ambition, it knows what they want to learn and how they learn. And then we're getting a lot of people that say, I want to work incognito. I just want it to be a machine. It comes back to me each time with generic responses. So how you use it really is up to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, it's actually first finished working on the data analysis, so we can see it's produced us some CSV files, some comma separated value files that we could open in Excel. So it's given us a summary table, per marker scores, an average scores bar chart as an image, box plot as an image, an interpretation file as a text file, and then a full Excel workbook with everything in it across the data. So extremely sort of wide variety of things and everything, in fact, that we asked it for. Again, to caveat it, you'd have to you would have to have the ability to check the results and to interpret them before you kind of put it in the direction of anybody else. But you can see it's been able in a couple of minutes to produce things that, if we assume are correct, might have taken a significant chunk of a day to produce manually. Let's just have a look at one of the images and see how it looks. It's not letting me do it right now. I won't spend time, but you can see how it works in this respect. So data analysis, yeah, it's very, very useful for. I found very large and complex spreadsheets need very large and complex prompts to get good results out of. You have to be a little bit careful because it can't necessarily divine all of the things that you know about your documents. You have to make sure you explain it quite clearly in your prompts. Okay, we'll have a quick look. Have we got time for deep research, Rob?
Yeah, I think we'll do deep research. There's one more question while you're in the background doing that, which is about drafting meeting notes and turning them into a more formal document. That is something that we have seen it done very well. The only concern around that would be the information that's obviously captured within those meeting minutes. So if it's a recorded meeting, what's being discussed? Does it include any personal sensitive information? Is it something that you're happy to be sharing with a tool that you could have data clearance, basically? Is it secure? So, but it can do that, and it can do that in a way that if you had the template of the document you wanted to output to, you could do so. So if that's something that you're interested in, get in touch with us at CIE, the Centre for Innovation and Education, and we can talk you through some options using university tools for different modes of that. But deep research, Gary, I think, yeah, one more sort of 3-minute demo and then a final questions.
Okay, I'll very quickly run through with the meeting notes thing. So I just have something prepared for that. I've told it it's an efficient, sorry, project manager. Summarize the meeting notes into a list of priority actions with an owner and suggested deadline. Okay, so then I've popped some fake meeting notes in there, and we can just see it's given us an action list based on the meeting notes. And then it's also offered to reorder them into high, medium, and low urgency categories. So I'm going to say just yes to that because it's a suggestion that I quite like the sound of. And it will then just try and produce that. Sometimes it will output it as an Excel for you. Sometimes it will just give you in a Word document, whatever. But yeah, you can see that it's very capable of reading through meeting notes as long as all of the information it needs is inside the transcript and everything's been clear. We can see that it's yeah, it's categorized them now into high urgency, and then we have our medium urgency items with the people, the task, and the deadlines. And then the lower urgency at the end we have as well, which is a bit further into the future.
Yeah. With this sort of technology, what we're seeing is with the further integration of tools we already use. So, for example, Teams, if you're at Liverpool, where you might record a meeting in Teams, Copilot is beginning to roll out the option to actually just automatically summarize the meeting notes. For now, it's part of the premium plan. So, Copilot Pro, there is a pilot for that coming up. We can provide information for that on the Padlet. So, if that's something that would interest your team, if you are doing meeting minutes and notes and typing, then that may be able to help you in that. So we'll help with that.
Definitely. Okay, the deep research very quickly. The deep research is a very interesting thing where it will go off and do some reading for you and try and come back and produce content based on that reading. So I give it a very simple prompt. This is Google Gemini's deep research option. So I said research novel ways to improve student experience employed by Russell Group universities in the UK. Okay. So it comes up with a little plan, first of all, about the type of research it's going to do. And this is before it does it. So it will come up with a plan. You can edit the plan before you send it off to do the research. So you read through it and then eventually you send it off. And it can take a while. It can take 6, 7, 8 minutes sometimes. And it comes back with a report. So I did this yesterday. And we can see that it's created this report here. So in the report, we have a content section, and we can jump to any of these sections that we like to read about. We can export it. In this case, it's a Google product, Gemini, so it would export to Google Docs, or you can just copy the whole of the contents. And then it will also create certain things for you based on the content of the report. So it will create a web page, an infographic, a quiz, or an audio overview, which is an extremely strange thing. It's like a podcast where two people discuss the content of the report. It sounds very natural. It's a little bit freaky, but it's very interesting sometimes to listen through. Normally about 15 minutes of chat about the content of the report. So if I just scroll down it kind of quickly, you can see that it's gone off. It's inserted a table here. We have good headings, and it's a long report. Any part of this report, it has a learn more button, and I can open it up there and see where it got this information. I can go directly to these sources that it's found this information in. Okay. If I go right to the bottom, it's a very long report. You can see all of the links that it used to generate the report. And you can also see the sources that it read but chose not to use in the report. So there's another load of sources there that it read but chose not to use. Okay, so let's see. Yeah, so I got it to make an infographic as well, I think. Let's have a look. Yeah, so based on the report, you could also make these things which are very sort of nice student-facing or professional-looking infographics. So it will use some nice nice graphics. It will use some charts. Everything's nicely plotted. It's well structured. We've got some nice graphs here. And this is just a different way to sort of view the same information that's contained in the report. These can be made in 1 or 2 minutes, really, and exported in the same way to PDF or to Word document or whatever. Yeah, they're really nice. And you can also get it to make web pages. This is actually a web page, a functional web page. We've got different tabs at the top. Again, all based on the same information in the report. And again, a functional web page, you can take the code, you can actually see the code here, and you could take that code and paste it wherever you wanted and have this as a live part of your web page or your Canvas site or whatever it is you intended to put it, really, wherever it is. Okay.
That's
Right.
lovely. Yeah, a lovely end, I think, there, Gary. 'Cause as you can see, we're going from that very basic sort of notepad level output of text to now developed web pages eventually with multimedia images in. We're aware of time coming to an end now. So what we'll do is I'll put the Padlet link back in the chat. So if you do have a question that's not been answered, pop your question into there and we'll pick that up sort of asynchronously at some point and you can check back in. Please do join us for the rest of the week. We've got, if that's piqued your interest, there's other things going on in much more detail around research, admin, agents, everything. We're trying to cover as much as we can this week. So we'll put all the recordings up onto the main Padlet, slides as well. So you'll have access to everything. And just to say thank you, Gary, especially joining us from Tenerife. Safe flight back tomorrow. And we'll see you back
Thank
in
you.
Liverpool by Friday when your next session is. But thanks, everyone. Have a lovely Monday.
Thanks, Gary. Thanks, Rob.